Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about why Troika games were so buggy. I get asked this a lot, and there are a lot of articles and videos talking about how Troika games were just so incredibly buggy. And I do have a video on why RPGs in general are so buggy, and I'll link it in the description. And I will remind you, Troika only made RPGs. We made 3 RPGs. It's not where we were called Troika. But the short answer is we had a lot of feature ideas. We did not edit ourselves very much at all. And we were a small team. And that just combined to make very, very buggy RPGs. So now let's I'll give you the longer answer because, as you know, sometimes the details are what matter. So every single time Troika went to go make a game, whether it was Arcanum or Temple of Elemental Evil or Bloodlines, there were just so many things we wanted to do. We had so many ideas, and we're like, well, in this game, we're going to do them, and we're going to get them right, and it's going to be new and different, and people are going to like it. And we tended to make those features quickly. Even worse, we made the tools to put in the content for those features very quickly. So both the features themselves and the tools to put in the content with those features were both very buggy. And then when you throw on top of that the fact that having a lot of features in a game tends to cause an additional kind of bugs because of the interactions. So you may have the ability to pick locks and the ability to steal things, but now that you can combine those and open a chest and get into it or pick something out of someone's pocket, you start to get all these interactions of bugs that would not have happened if you'd only had one of those or the other, but not both. So we have all this content we're trying to make, and we're trying to make it very quickly because we're trying to add a lot of content to our games. Like I said, we didn't edit ourselves much back then. We were all in our, I think everybody was in their late 20s and early 30s, and we just wanted to basically get a bunch of stuff in there. So we'd make this content as quickly as possible to try to fit it into the schedule we made. And the schedule was what it was because I wasn't a very good businessman and our budgets weren't very big. So we usually had to do things on a very compressed schedule. So we're putting lots of content in, it's buggy. And then there's the issue of using the wrong tools. Now, you may think it's bad to ask someone to, say, cut a piece of lumber and you give them a screwdriver. They might be able to do it. They might be able to hack at that 2x4 and get it broken in two, but that's not going to be a very good cut. Even worse, though, is when you give someone a full tool chest and there's a saw in there, and they use the screwdriver anyway. And then sometimes they look at you and go, well, you didn't tell me there was a saw. You didn't teach me how to use the saw. And so we had those issues too, where sometimes content was thrown together in just the wrong way. Like there was maybe a script command that could have done it, but somebody did it themselves individually with individual script commands. And now maybe the action wasn't atomic or didn't have all the checks built into it that the script command would have had. If they'd called the script command to transfer the item, it would have checked a lot of things, but instead they removed the item and then placed it in the new place rather than call transfer. And then bugs got introduced because you should have used transfer and not take and put. That was a problem. Now, on top of that, if you not to necessarily blame the people who are doing the scripting with that, if you combine the fact that all those tools were dull and prone to break anyway, then yeah, you can see that there's just going to be a lot of trouble cutting that lumber. And the things you make with that lumber are going to be very janky. That's what happened. Oh, but on top of that, I should say, sort of, and finally, us making so much content, tons of content means tons of bugs. The more stuff you have, the more features, the more NPCs doing dialogues, the more things you can do in those dialogues, the more scripts you write, the more spells you have, the more creatures you have, the more bugs you're going to have. And then because of our compressed schedule and just how we made things, none of those bugs were found. And at Troika, we wanted a lot of features and content, and there wasn't a lot of us to make it. And that small budget and the fact that we didn't edit ourselves and we put on all those features anyway, that's a recipe for just making a really buggy game. And that's what we did. And we didn't do it just once. We did it 3 times. And you'd think we would have learned But every time I think we learned the wrong lesson. So we made Arcanum and we're like, okay, that game was just too expansive, too open world for us to make. So then we made Temple, which was much more condensed, and it's basically a couple towns and a dungeon, and you think be able to get it right. But then we do Vampire, and we're like, we're gonna make 3D, and we're gonna have real time combat and stuff we just wasn't really in our wheelhouse, and we did it anyway. And that game had a lot of bugs, and we used a brand new engine for that, which we didn't fully understand and wasn't completed, and it was buggy. So, short of us deciding we're gonna hold out for a bigger budget, we're going to do far fewer features. Even if the publisher asks for more features, we're going to cut them down. Even if we want more features, we're going to edit ourselves down. We just didn't want to do any of that. And so we never did. So it was our fault the games were buggy. But you know what? If you think about it, we weren't the only ones who were shipping buggy games, especially buggy RPGs. I'm sure if you think about it, you can think of a few other companies that were making buggy RPGs as well. Personally, I think RPGs are just prone to be more buggy than a typical game. Watch my video on why RPGs are buggy. But anyway, I think that's as short as an explanation as I can make on why Troika games were so buggy. And again, this is an explanation. Many of you are going to be thinking, "Oh, that's an excuse," because you're just you have to view explanations as excuses. I'm not making an excuse. I tried to give an explanation on why our games are so buggy. We were a small team trying to make a really overly featured, huge amount of content game for a team that size. And those were all choices we made and went with. And the result was some very, very buggy games. Or as people called them, flawed masterpieces, which I think sounds a lot better than really buggy game. Anyway, I hope that answers your question.